Hey, folks, welcome back to The Pulse. My name's Matt. Folks, it is 11 o'clock Central Texas time, and I have had the most crazy couple days. And this is going to be a little bit of a different approach. I'm only streaming this on Twitter and Christians in Crypto. I want to tell you a story of what happened yesterday. We're going to do things a little differently to hear from Steve as well. But I just want to share this with you because it's incredible. Yesterday, um, was the whole Richard Hart oral arguments in New York while I was in Brooklyn, and Danny the singer was there, and I'd remembered it was Halloween and he was going to be there, and I thought, it'd be really cool to get an interview with out in front of the courthouse before and then after. And an amazing thing happened yesterday. I don't know if you guys caught it, if you paid attention, but the first stream had 1,660 people on it, and then the second stream had 2,100 people on it. And if it wasn't for Danny, who was standing next to Axie's Alive, and Axie's like literally, I mean, it was almost like he was like a commentator on CNBC. And if you haven't gotten a chance to watch that, especially the second one where you hear, they characterized the the SEC attorneys and how they presented to the judge, and then also Richard's lawyers. And something special happened there in that stream because in my whole streaming career since the very beginning, I think the most people that have ever been on a stream was like 280 in the last bull run. And to see, over 2,000, it just kind of, it's an indicator of the times, right? Not only the interest in the Richard Hart ecosystem, but there was something else. It's like, hey, it's about to get really interesting. And so, this podcast, Right Side Up, in honor of Steve Staggs, is for those of you who are new, right? Let's say you're coming in off of the X platform, or you saw something yesterday and you're like, hey, what's going on? So on Crypto Heartbeat, my focus is predominantly on the crypto market, but what I focus on is this alternative financial system. That this is really a way bigger opportunity than just a single coin or something, and very different than, hey, let's just get rich. I'm sure that's a nice outcome, but really connecting it to the whole purposes, right? The purpose of like what's actually happening here. Is there something that God is doing in the world and he's using the money? Well, yeah, he uses the money all throughout the scriptures, and it's a big part of what draws people to him and to understand who he is and everything. So very, very fascinating. But what happened yesterday and then what came out of it is it's like a quickening, if you will. Like things are advancing and moving it's a new time. That's really what it is. And of course, we've got the election coming up here, November 5th. So 4 days. It's crazy. And of course, things are going to get nutty, obviously, after they, count all the extra ballots. And so whatever that outcome is going to be really interesting. But then it's going to be like this battle, I think, on the streets and in liberal cities up until January 6th, which they'll certify the election. So, it used to be, I used to watch television and it's like, oh yeah, we know who the winner is. And then it just moved forward. Well, I have a feeling that this is going to be much more heated. So, but the purpose of Right Side Up is I want to tell you the story as we get into this. So years ago, we had launched the Texan Token, and we had a Texan Token meetup in Dallas. Right in the south part of Dallas, we had a meetup. And so we traveled up and went to that, and a guy named Carter, who might end up actually being here in this stream, he introduced me to a friend that he brought. And that friend, what I came to learn, his name was Steve Staggs. And Steve had been talking to Jesus about, hey, how does this all fit together? And I think the Lord told him, hey, crypto is something about this. And so he was happy to come and kind of meet the people that Carter wanted to introduce him to. And as soon as I shook his hand, the Lord said to me, listen to him. Well, that sounds like, oh yeah, well, okay. Well, I did. I listened to him for the next 2 years. And We're going to be listening to a clip here from episode 37. And this is the last episode that Steve ever did with me live. I haven't reviewed this section that I'm going to share, so I'm just going to go into it with you. Um, but I chose this one because it was such a pivotal moment, right? Because 2 days later he had passed, and yeah, so that's what we're doing today. But I'll come back. We'll talk about what we learn, um, and then we'll dig into that. But the focus of Right Set Up. So I do this on Fridays at 11 a.m. and I continue to do this. This is episode 74. Um, and so and then I'll share some things afterwards, just kind of unpacking what happened over the last couple days because it's really, really cool. We're coming into a really, really interesting era, and I believe that it's completely tied in with God's plan in His kingdom. So, thanks for being here. And for those of you who may be new, this is not your typical crypto content. So, welcome. And the question that Steve asked me is, "Are you interested?" I am. All right, let's check it out here. This is Steve Staggs, episode 37, and it's really kind of a random spot. And so let's see what we learn together.
I seem to be saying this a lot in our more recent streams about another great question, because each one of them gets deeper and deeper and deeper into the reality of the things that we have been talking about.
Yeah.
And let me describe that just real briefly as kind of a backdrop to this. We don't realize it because we have been told or made to think something different, but we have really been taught within the Christian dynamic, within the church world, to be academics.
Yep.
And so the great prize in life is to be able to know the Bible, quote it back and forth, be able to teach and preach and talk all about it. We're marvelous academics. The only thing about an academic is he or she studies things that have already happened. They're historic in nature, and you view them from a distance. Well, that's okay as an introduction, but that isn't where Jesus lives. That isn't where he keeps us. And so if you want to hang with him, he takes you beyond the academic knowing about stuff to actually getting in the middle to know it. And in the English language, we only have one word, know. Now we have some synonyms like understand, or the deeper level of comprehend. But in the biblical context, there are different words for knowing. And one of them is to know by personal firsthand experience. And there's a whole parable about that, and in Mark chapter 4, the great parable that you has really struck home to you, where few of the disciples ran after him and said, "Okay, dude, what do you mean by this?" He goes in there and he says, "How will you then know all the parables if you don't know this one?" So if you know it by observation, how will you then get to know it by firsthand personal experience? If you don't know by observation and then learn by firsthand personal experience what this parable means.
Yeah.
Well, right there, our language doesn't have the ability to communicate that, but it is wonderfully communicated, in the Greek language. So now, what does that have to do with your question? Well, it's not a big stretch. Once you start getting acquainted with God, and how he does things and who he is, it's not hard to say, I know he's got this.
Right.
Because your whole philosophical foundation is based on that. He's omnipotent, he's omnipresent, he's all-knowing. And so if a being who is supreme above all others, well, of course he's got it.
Yeah.
See, so that's not a big deal. So we are trained that he's got it. But then there's the next level, which is where he says it to you, Matt, I've got this. Oh, wait a minute. So we've just moved from the concept that he's got it. Okay, that aligns with my theological premise Of course he does. He has to. Otherwise, he couldn't be all the things that I say that he is. But now he has said to me, hey, I've got this. Whoa. Well, we then have some choices, don't we? And
Yeah.
I'm now relating this to you personally and then going to, what I meant by the next one in my experience. Well, now he's taking me to the next step where, okay, I'm just not giving you a philosophical framework. I'm now telling you specifically, Matt, I've got this. Well, what we then have the choice of doing is exactly like those folks in Mark 4. Am I going to assume that he's just assuring me, or am I going to say, well, what do you have in mind there when you say that to me? Well, okay, let's take a step back. If I say I've got this, first of all, what do you first think when I say that? And all of a sudden you get a chance to say, oh, wow, whatever your particular interest is. Well, that means he's got it financially. Okay, well, why would we think that in the context of your opening, right? Well, I'm in a time when I need some finances. I've got that. And so we then leap to the thing of our direct need, finances. And so our focus becomes very narrow when he has said something very broad.
Mm-hmm.
I've got this. Well, when he says I've got that, that means that nothing that intersects this is beyond his direct and immediate reign. I've got this. There's nothing that enters into this domain, enters into this world, enters into this situation. There's nothing that exits from it that I don't got. Okay. Oh, well, okay. Man, that's a lot bigger than I thought you got my finances covered.
Yeah.
See, all of a sudden, man, that thing starts getting really big. So he takes us from the concept of knowing, then to the assurance and a direct comment to knowing, to then expanding our perspective about what that means and entails if he's got it. And then it hits home to us. Do I really get that he's got it? Or am I just transferring to him, he's got it, while I sit there in this state of total panic or confusion or wondering, especially that I've even heard him correctly? And so all of a sudden, I start seeing all of the things that are going on in me that, well, it doesn't really matter if he's got it, if I don't get that he's got it. That kind of talks about James 1, right? If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, but let him ask in faith, not wavering, lest he become like one who is tossed here and there, being a double-minded man.
Huh.
Well, guess what you're learning in that situation? There's really two minds going on here. There's the mind of the academic who philosophically deals with things. There's the mind of Jesus who's absolutely assured. There is no deviation from what he is saying. There is no insecurity. I've got this, Matt. And then there's my mind. And my mind is not being benefited by the concept that he's got it. As a matter of fact, it's not really much helping that I know he's got it, because this thing that I need is looming so large. So getting to the place where we get it, that he's got it, that is the big work. And so everything that then flows into that starts being viewed from a different perspective once that actually starts to land. And so what it meant for me when I said, do you got it? It's okay, Matt, you're not done with this particular journey. You've got another step or two to take.
Yep.
And it's important that you take that, because everything that's coming into this situation is light and it's revealing something.
Yep.
So if your issue is money, that money is revealing things. Are you prepared to see them, what it's revealing, or are you so wound up still in the lack, or what you think is the lack, that you're not able to take advantage and to see what Jesus is showing you in the middle of this thing?
Yeah.
And so that's what, having gone through my own firsthand personal experience with this a number of times, I said, okay, man, this is it. And you're going to enjoy this once you get through it, because it's going to be profound. And you will eventually become just as secure as he is in his statement. You'll become that way as well. So that's what I meant.
Well, Steve, what's funny is I think because you're so clear and disciplined and precise in your language, I think sometimes even when I listen to you, I'm like, I could imagine you sounding like you're speaking a parable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it is so clear and it is so precise. And I think part of the role I have to play in all of this is to say it back to you
Yeah.
in kind of, here's what I experienced. What we're talking about here to me is one of the most important things in all of creation. It feels that way to me because it's so profound. We think about what is the value of Jesus? What is the value of faith? What is the value of this whole thing? Why does it even matter? And it all comes, in my opinion, down to this.
Yeah.
If there are no reward, if there is no benefit, if there is no outcome that is better, right? And those of us who have been academic about the Bible, we would say, well, it's a peace that transcends all understanding. It's a straight path. It's while he is the supreme being, all things were made for him and by him. All of these things that I might know or might have memorized or might have learned, like you're saying, is knowledge. Where the rubber meets the road and the practical nature of this stuff is, and the beauty of it is, I think you couldn't have said it better, that this is the exposure of the light in all of these cases. And to me, it's where it's all kind of come to a point. Rather than judging me, he didn't say to me, "You have no faith, you punk." He didn't say that to me,
No.
and nor did you.
No.
He said, "Do you got it that I've got it?" And I think the thing that really got me was that night, I woke up at 2:37. And you said to me during that conversation, because I was still kind of, if to use kind of your language, I was still kind of covered up by it, right? I was still like, it was kind of overwhelming, right? I was in the midst of this. I didn't know which way was up. And here you call it this precise time and share this. And I'm like, okay, what does this mean? And of course, everything you always tell me is, hey, ask him yourself. But what I found was this, and this is so huge. I think in the past, when I really haven't had need, I would pray. And I would pray like they taught me in church.
Hmm.
Hey, Jesus, you're awesome. And I need some stuff. And, help this person. And, this kind of generic stuff. What I came to realize in this moment, and I've seen it before, but it's like Technicolor, is you have nothing to say. I have nothing to request. All I can say is, how do you see this? Because I don't have a good view of it. And I think what happens is it's almost that's really at the core of all of this. He's trying to get us to the point where, are you going to lean on your own understandings, or are you going to ask me how I see this? And it's interesting because it goes from being a request or, hey, here's my list of things that I'm interested in. And hey, why don't you come my way? And it's like, okay, I'm into this position so far. And it seems like all is lost. It seems as if it's all going to break apart. And what's amazing about it is like, no, there's a reason that it needs to be this painful. And of course, then what comes to mind is consider it pure joy. I'm like, I don't know that I'm very good at considering it pure joy when facing trials of many kinds. I'm not very good at that. Like when I'm facing troubles of many kinds, I don't consider it joy at all. It's actually quite painful, sir. And what is amazing about this is I realized something really, really, really profound. And it was cool because you said to me, you know, and this is how I took it. You didn't say these exact words, but it's like you're too close to it. I literally, and we were talking about the money, right? And if you think about it, like you're right. We're so narrowly focused on this one thing. And Jesus' perspective is from a high place, right?
Yeah.
He is what the hell's going on. I don't know what the hell's going on, Steve.
You're
So
right.
all I can do is go, you obviously see this differently than I do. So let me ask you, how do you see this?
Yes.
And he goes, that's the key. Okay, so now how do you see this? And what he put in my mind was that big lazy Susan. And
Yes.
if you guys don't know this, so there's this big round table in front of me, and in this is this big lazy Susan. And of course, if you've ever eaten at a table that's got a big lazy Susan, it's pretty cool because you can put the food on it and spin it around, right? And everybody gets to kind of share because you've got this big lazy Susan, right? So he literally puts the money on it. And in my mind, while I'm talking to you, Steve, he takes that and moves that away from me. So imagine it's right up close, and he pushes it all the way 180 degrees to the back. And so, you've heard people say you can't see the forest for the trees. And that's kind of what it was. It's like, all right, let's put this in its proper place. And so that was helpful in that moment, right? I'm like, okay, so yeah, I'm too close to this. So, and then of course you were like, hey, there's more to this. So, all right, if I'm supposed to consider it pure joy when facing these troubles, then there's a purpose in them. And what really struck home for me, Steve, was if I truly believe that he's got it, you asked the exact right question. Do you got that he's got it? And what's so cool is I had you're gonna love this, Steve. I asked AI to give me an image, and AI gave me an image. He's like, "I got it. You got it." I thought you'd get a kick out of that.
Yeah, right.
And it's really amazing because I did get it. And so I woke up at 2:37, and I've got it like this heavy weighted blanket, my CPAP, right? Old man crypto heartbeat, right? And of course you can breathe under that because you've got like a pipe coming in. And I literally am just like, all right, Lord, how do you see this? And this is what he says to me. He shows me an image of a plate, and that plate is glass, and that plate is falling onto a hard surface. The plate is transparent, it's made of glass, and it's falling. And around that is money. And of course, in this falling of the plate, imagine something falling that is almost like it's tumbling because of the wind. And I had AI create an image of that too. So let's look at what that looks like, because I want you guys. This is so huge to me that I want to share it with you. Hang on a second. I gotta pull it up here. And it's so profound that it's like, and what I love about it is that he communicated with me in imagery and I saw it and I heard it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really, really cool that it was, it was both and.
Yes.
And so, all right, here we go. I'll just have to do it this way. Share screen, window. Okay. Share. Okay. So this is the image. Okay. And this is about as good as it gets, right? It was probably not this up close. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So I see this plate falling. It's transparent plate, and I see this money, right? And I'm like, this is going to break apart. And he says, it's not falling apart. It's falling in place. Okay. So this
Yeah.
was essentially, but I saw this all in motion. And so this is humongous stuff. Like, I mean, absolutely mind numbing things, because I think what it's showing is this is how it works. Whatever the situation, this is the framework of how it works. I don't know, like, I can't force it, but I know that this is the framework of how it works. I ask him, how do you see this? And he says, this needs to be moved away from you. You need to understand what this financial thing is. And anything, it could be,
Yes.
what is this
Yes.
cancer? What is this sudden death? What
Yes.
is this, whatever it is. If we believe he's the supreme being and that he has this perspective, then what I've noticed since then is he's done 80 things, and I was thinking he was doing one thing. I
Absolutely.
attributed to him, you've got it means you've got the money. No. He's like,
No.
I have the cattle or on 1,000 hills, or I have all of it, right? But what I have, you don't even know what I've got, because I've got it all.
Yeah.
And so what's amazing about it is I saw this image and I'm like, okay, so what you're saying is that in the falling of this and in the anticipation in the natural of it crashing to pieces and falling apart, you're using that strain, you're using that pain to expose the truth in me.
Yeah.
What did he expose in me? You don't really believe that I've got it. You're paying lip service to me. You don't really believe that I've got it. But I'm going to show you that I've got it, because I'm a loving father and I don't destroy you. And I'm like, okay, well, thank you for not destroying me. But then what ended up happening out of that is a number of relationships that were around this issue of the challenges of this proved themselves. And there were a number of things that literally since then I said, I needed to use this to vet out and to expose the truth. And it wasn't just in me, but it was in me.
Yeah.
To expose to you that you don't see things the way I see things. And it makes me humbled to go, I got to stop making a list for Jesus. I need to start asking him how he sees stuff.
Right on.
Because his seeing stuff, I can't even comprehend what he sees. But that's when you talk about, like, this is becoming real. Is he strategic? It seems such a simple term to say. Oh yeah, well, what do I think of as strategic, right? Well, that's a strategic business move. No, the word strategic doesn't even fit.
Doesn't even begin to touch
It doesn't even begin.
Yeah.
It just touches the surface of how unbelievably faceted it is. But I had to understand, okay, it's hard to make the choice to consider it pure joy. But if you truly believe that he's got it and means that he's ahead of you, he's a shepherd, we recognize his voice, he is strategic, all of these things are being worked together. Even the things that seemed accidental, even the things that seem like they are not orchestrated, are all redeemed for the purposes of exposing the truth. And that's what has been happening. But what's beautiful about that is this is now becoming, it's now becoming clear. The pressure is still on, but it's almost like, how can someone have peace in the midst of torture?
Yeah.
Right. And you think about, what's the worst possible thing? Let's pull your fingernails out. Let's cut off your extremities. What is that? Can you? Yeah, he's got that too. And I'm like, that's hard to imagine. But what's interesting about it is he showed me, it's really weird. He used the Bible
Yeah.
to remind me of things. And what's amazing about it is he used the scriptures to help me understand, but it was actually for me in the moment, not academically in retrospect.
Right.
It's like, no, this is really useful. I've talked about these things over and over again. Now you're going to see these things into practice. But I think that the commentary is around this idea that is essentially the spirit of the church, that there is a, I mean, in the last 200 years, there's been this move towards um, what dispensationalism, right?
Yeah.
That there is no, these things are over. That the living Jesus does not speak. There are no revelations. You can't talk to him. He's dead. And here I am seeing, actually, no, he's very much alive and very much has it all still under control. And what's amazing to me is, like, I don't know that I have attributed to him that he cares about all of it at once
Yes.
and at all players in all situations, but for a purpose that has a general trajectory, which is, I'm exposing the truth of this. And what is the benefit of that? Okay, I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to advance this ball, but in the process, you're going to understand the terms of relationships. You're going to understand the pitfalls. You're going to see things through this pain that will be helpful for you in the future. But the consistency it is a constant redemption.
Yes.
Because the truth redeems these things. And it's not that they're not painful, because they are painful. And it's not like it makes you numb to it. It's almost that it puts it in its proper place.
Yes.
So that's a lot to say. But Steve, it's a different, I mean, I've had a lot of ahas with you. This is probably at the core, the most fundamental, because it's applicable to like everything. Like, this is it. You either believe that I'm sovereign over all of this and I've got it, or you don't. And otherwise, you're just playing. We're just playing a game. And I think that that's a lot of what we see in cultural Christianity, is that you have a form of godliness, but you deny its power. Why? You say that I've got it, but you're freaked out. You're consumed by it. And I know it says consider it pure joy, but I don't do that. And that is really somewhat convicting, but it's also showing me how the framework works. And it's priceless. I don't even know what to say.
Well, you're saying plenty, and it is fun to hear you share these things, because there are so many things we've talked about in the over the course of these streams and personally together, that are coming to a head and moving into their place of reality. The lazy Susan. Well, what precipitated the lazy Susan was, okay, Matt, this is where you practice stepping outside of this thing. Remember, we were talking about that, and this is where you step outside of it and you start looking from the micro of the money to looking at this. I think we described it as the broader spiritual landscape, and then saying, okay, Jesus, how do you see that? Well, what are you doing when you say that? You're getting out from underneath this earthly kind of perspective that's very narrow, to actually taking him up on his invitation to sit with him, to take a look at it.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you're doing. Now, the words that introduce that idea is to sit with Christ in heavenly places. But that's just a concept that, if you're not careful, will obligate you to something that you've never experienced, so you start pretending. Well, Jesus isn't in the pretend business.
Yeah.
He's in the reality business. He's in the truth business. As a matter of fact, once again, if you look at the language that he had the New Testament written in, our word truth actually has a parallel meaning of reality. Reality is truth and truth is reality. Boy, when you take a look at that, it is fascinating that, okay, now you get a whole different picture, because what can also be the truth, and what is the truth? It's character quality. It's because you have two facts that are two events, exactly the same thing happening. Case in point, that plate was falling, and there were money all around that plate as it was drifting through the air currents and getting ready to crash on the ground. Well, what produces that money? Human beings. They are the wealth producers. Well, that thing was happening. That single event was happening. That outcome was going to occur. What was the difference? Your perspective and anticipation of what was going to happen, and Jesus's perspective of what was going to happen. Your conclusion was that it was going to crash to the ground and, shatter into a billion pieces, that it was going to fall apart. Jesus's perspective was, no, it's falling into place. Same event,
Yep.
two entirely different perspectives. One is upside down, one is right side up. And he will allow us to take and choose whichever perspective we want. That's the liberty that comes to the Elohim man. He is free to choose.
And you know what's amazing is we can choose to come to him.
Yes.
So I was talking to you on the phone, and my son was sitting in the passenger seat, and we got done with our call. And I had told him that because I was telling you about this. He said, "It's not falling apart; it's falling in place." And Gage goes, after I got off the phone with you, he goes, "Like, how do you know that was Jesus? How do you know that he said that?"
Great question.
Well, yeah, because I've asked you the same exact one. That was one of my first questions of you. I was like, "Hey, son, you're asking the right question here."
Yep.
And I said, and it was weird how these things come to you, right? Because here I am, like now I'm telling my son about this, right? This is the expanse of this. And I said to him, I said, "When you want to talk to me, do you go talk to the dog?" And he's like, "Ha ha ha, dad." Right? I'm like, "You don't, right? When you want to talk to me, you don't go talk to the dog." And it sounds dumb, but it's true.
Yes.
And I said, "So the question is this: how do I know that it's Jesus? Because I came to him to ask him. I didn't just in my mind make up some words and ideas. No, I came to him with an intent of hearing from him." So in our natural world, you'd walk into the living room and you'd come sit down next to me and ask me a question. You wouldn't go, "Oh, dad's over there. I'm going to go talk to the dog about this and hope he hears."
Yeah.
And it was really actually kind of cool. I said, "Well, what is your intent? What do you want?" And it helped me realize what was I doing. And so I woke up at 2:37 and I'm under, and I literally was like, it's almost like in all of this, he wanted me to see I needed everything to be it's almost like he needed me to be aware of my lack of strength, right? Needed to be in this position of I got nothing.
Yeah.
So okay, you're open to listening. But I didn't have a list of things that I needed because I didn't know how to solve the problem. And so I'm coming to him and I feel like that's this idea of a contrite heart. What does it mean to really truly be like and you think about it, what's the cycles of the stories of the Israelites? Things get good and they're like, "Yeah, we got everything." And then things go to hell in a handbasket and they're like, "Oh my gosh, sackcloth and ashes. We need to come back to you." And I find the same cycles in my own life, right? And then you think about it, it's like careful what you wish for,
Yeah. Yep.
because in some respects, in this wanting state, we rely on him. But I almost feel like all he's saying is, "I'm here and available." And if you come to me, what you're going to find is I'm going to reveal to you how strategic and big and all this. And it's amazing to me that here we are building super AI and we have him right here, and we've had him all along. It's crazy. I told you that I hadn't reviewed this prior to sharing. So that was the last 2 days later, Steve suddenly passed away. 2 days later. So that was a Friday at 11. And then Sunday midday, he was gone. And for me, it's hard when I spent, close to 2 years with a guy and he spent so much time with me. And I just want to tell you that I had two conversations, one last night and one earlier right before this stream, where the language and these things, these ahas that I had with Steve are now incorporated into the very counsel and discussions that I have on a daily basis. And there's no price you could put on the wisdom that Steve shared with me. And when I watched that, it's crazy that was the episode. It was almost like watching that again. It was like that's the moment it happened. And I was looking at Steve while I was watching that with you, and I could just tell in his eyes. He's like, and I on episode 38, I was like experiencing or expressing that I felt like he had passed the baton to me. And so I was taking notes during that. And it's interesting when you look into the scriptures, who does God say he is? He says, "I am." And I never really understood that, right? Like, what does that mean? I am. I think is that like a 0 or a 1? It's like 1, I am. And so like listening to that again, I was reminded of what Steve had told me. He said, if you actually look at who Jesus says he is, right? He was, he is, and he is to come. What's fascinating about this whole story and this whole experience that we have in life, this purpose, is that the same thing is described of the beast, which is Satan, in Revelation 17. He says he was, he isn't, and he will be, and ultimately will be destroyed. What does that say? Jesus is, I am. Satan isn't, in the present. Okay, so one of the challenges is he broke down this difference between academic and practice. Satan's okay with, and it's okay if you talk about the historic Jesus, right? Knock yourself out, man. You can talk about all the things he did, all the stories he told, all the places he walked, but you start practicing this in the present with the I am. And that's the big gift that Steve gave to me. This isn't about pretending. It's not about pretending and gaining knowledge and going, hey, I can quote the Bible in this many way. I mean, it's useful to know it, right? But what is so poignant is it's the practice that is the where the battle is. The battle is for your hearts and your minds in the present, because what's amazing is I think a lot of people, I had this discussion with a colleague earlier before this call. I said, well, why did God create? You know, if I break it down for you, you'd say, okay, he said, let's make man in our image. Okay. And then every story that Jesus talks about, a lot of them are this idea of sonship. What does it mean to be a part of the family? What does it mean to have the attributes of God? What does it mean to be created in his image? And I'm reminded of the story we said so many times. Like if you went downtown New York and you said, I'm going to talk to 100 people and I'm going to ask 100 people this question: who's more powerful, angels or men? 99 out of 100 would say angels. Why is that? Well, what is Satan but a fallen angel? Well, what are angels? Angels are not men. They are not created in the image of God. They are messengers. The word angel means messenger. And what is amazing about this hierarchy is, why is it upside down? Because the hierarchy has been inverted. There are three classes. There's the ruling class, the ministering class, and the servant class. So the ruling class are those to rule and reign. Well, what did God say to Adam and Eve? Go, be fruitful, multiply, have dominion over. Right? That's rulership. Right? You're going to go subdue this land. What have I given you? Well, you now see the difference between good and evil. And I've given you the choice to make. If you walk with me in the present, you have free will, and you walk with me, I'll make your path straight. But what is the business of the present but discerning between lookalikes? Two trees in the garden, both look like good trees and both have fruit. Discerning between them. This one is death, this one is life. It's the picture in the story. And when you realize the intent all along was that you would be like him, then the battle is for the present. The battle is for you, how you think. So why does it say in Romans 12 that you should do not conform any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Do not conform to the patterns of this world. Oh, it's upside down. This world is upside down. Oh, those are the patterns of this world. But be transformed by the renewing of your mind. How do I do that? I guess I have to see things how you see things. And so that story and what happened there was so profound, and it continues to infiltrate everything of my daily life and conversations. Is It redefined the two most important things to me. We do not understand what prayer and what faith is. We think prayer is a list of requests. And certainly there are times to petition God, right? It's very clear. I mean, even Jesus petitioned the Father and said, if there's another way we can do this, remove this cup from me. Remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, he's like sweating blood? That was a request. But what happened is he went to the Father and the Father gave him his perspective. How would the scriptures be fulfilled if we didn't go through with this? We planned this since the beginning. And Jesus was changed. Just like you and I are when we go and we request. If you're seated with him in these high places, you're seated with him in the heavenlies. It's so that you have his perspective. But you can only have his perspective if you renew your mind by literally testing and proving what God's will is, asking him. And so at the end of the day, what's so amazing about this is the church says you need to get saved, brother. The question is, are you interested? When I was 12 years old and everybody's telling me I needed to get saved, I was like, no, I don't. Why? Because I didn't have any interest and I didn't have any need. They were telling me I was supposed to do that. That's a system, a program of thinking. But what happened when God brought me to this place where I saw him for who he was standing alone in the whirlwind, as Steve says. And he's inviting you to walk with him. This isn't some system of religion. This is a person who is the truth. And what's amazing about it is he talked about the spiritual landscape, about backing up and being able to see it. The lazy Susan that takes the money, the focus of your attention away from you to say, back up, bro, and look at it how I see it. And I will show you. But what's so amazing is the word is, it's not falling apart, it's falling in place. What is that? It's his perspective. The question is, how are we applying this to absolutely everything? Well, that was his intent all along. Why did God create? So that his man would rule and reign with him in the fullness of his nature and character. There is a plan that has been spelled out very clearly. The disciples asked Jesus how to pray, and he said, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. You are the supreme Father. You are the all-knowing, right? Your kingdom come. Well, that sounds like the kingdom isn't here if it has to come. Your will be done, not mine, on earth as it is in heaven. So if you created us to rule and reign in the fullness of your nature and character on this planet and in this time for a very short amount of time, then how are we fitting into that? Well, it's your plan, not mine. You're the vine, I'm the branches. All right, without me, you can do nothing. Okay, so how do you see this? Well, guess what creates real fruit? When you have his perspective. And how does it come to you? So that's the prayer thing, right? You're seeking his perspective. That's what prayer is, right? I come to him with a lot of needs, but what do I come away with? His perspective. So what is faith? So much in the system of the church, it is something that you muster. You need to share your faith, brother. It's very common kind of, colloquial, Christianity is this idea of, well, I got to play this game and share your faith. Faith comes through hearing. What are you hearing? The spoken words of Jesus, his perspective. So it's amazing when you drill into the words of what faith is, it's actually given to you through the speaking. How can you imagine having any faith if you don't hear the one who's speaking? And so the definition of those two things, what is prayer and what is faith? Faith isn't something I muster that I have in me that I'm just like, well, no, he's spoken a lot of things. So yeah, you do carry around those atomic packets of faith, as Steve would say. But what's beautiful about it is it's his perspective. Because when I look at this world and I look at I laser focus on the practicalities of this world, it looks like it's falling apart. Oh no, he's got this. The question is, do you got that he's got it? And we just need that reminder. So what's the whole point of this thing? Why am I doing this on Fridays? Why am I honoring Steve Staggs? Because I need the reminder. He says the Sabbath is made for man. It's a reminder. And that's why I would say this, folks, you need somebody in your life that you can be transparent with and talk with and examine these things. And Steve provided that for me. He was a mentor in the sense that I looked up to him and said, hey, but you know what's so great about, unlike the mentor, you're like, well, this guy knows financial stuff and I don't know. I'm learning things. He never asked me to submit to him. He said, I'm going to tell you some things about my experience of what I've done over these last 40 some years. And I want you to go ask him yourself because the truth is probable. The truth is probable. You notice the things that are the lies in the political realm? They're like, shut up. Don't ask those questions. Why? Because it's false. Because falsehood, if you probe it, falsehood is proven false. But the truth can be probed and probed and probed, and it still remains the truth. Actually becomes multifaceted truth. It's like a multifaceted diamond. That diamond, as you turn it in the light, shines at you in so many different perspectives. And of course, we know the evidence of God's work in the world is that it impacts so many other domains at once. You know this. When God moves, you're like, it wasn't just for me. It was like for my wife, for my kids, for this situation, for this business. And it's like, well, yeah, it's falling in place because that's how I created it. But I didn't create this so you would go it on your own. And so if you think about it, the fall of Satan himself is one who disobeys and goes his own way. And then every temptation is about, hey, I'll give you this stuff. So what does Satan do? He tempts you and says, hey, I'm going to make you an offer. You want this offer? I'll give you power. And so this system, this upside down world is built on that. He is the king of the air. And so in this upside down world, you're getting traded power for your authority. And what does he say? No, the way that I set this up is that you walk with me. I'm the vine, you're the branches. And as we walk together, these things fall into place because I've got a strategic purpose because I'm creating an army. We're coming into an amazing era. This era is, in some cases, attracting so many people like moth to flame to money. Right? This is the first time in human history where political power and financial power have been separated. We see crypto and the gains and all that stuff, and we're like, I need this. And we see it all the time throughout history. If I just had another Super Bowl ring, I would be satisfied. But what's amazing about this is the satisfaction of our soul is peace and purpose. And you could even be tortured and still have that kind of experience. It's like, wow, why is it that I have peace in the midst of the storm? And that's the precision of God. This is the provision. And what's amazing about this is Steve passed away and I was bummed out and a lot of people were very, very sad. But there were people who lived 900 years, right? There's people who lived a lot longer. Methuselah, Noah himself, Abraham. Why would he shorten it to 120 years? It's the grace of God because this isn't real life. This is the training ground for what it is. And the question is, are you going to do this with me in the fullness of my nature and character? Are you going to store up your treasures in heaven? Well, what does that mean? You're going to be in charge of 5 cities or 10 cities. Do you understand how I have organized this thing? Well, it seems like a mystery. How do I find out? Ask me. Are you interested? And that's where the journey begins. And I think what a lot of people who may have been turned off by the church or have had bad experiences with a father or whatever it may be, or like, I don't want to approach this thing because it sounds so damn hokey. No, the question is, are you interested? Because Jesus is alive and he speaks. That's all that this is. This is not a religion. This is a person and he is the truth. What did he say about himself? I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. It's upside down. The question is, if you have my perspective, you'll see it writes that up. Whew. Some good stuff. It's amazing. Dang. So, episode 74. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for investing so much time. I hope to be like Steve when I grow up. I hope to be somebody who is as patient and long-suffering and patient some more, and someone who loves and cares and is investing in other people and is a herald of the truth, right? Not in a judgmental way. Because Steve's approach was always, hey, Matt, are you open to a different way of looking at this? And I'm like, yeah. He's so disarming. And it was just like, oh, yeah. Well, He never ever stomped on my neck. And you think about like when I first met him, the Lord said, "Listen to him." And I said, "Is he an angel?" And I always teased him about that, but it feels a lot like that, that he was a messenger and just a blessing to me and of course to his family and everything. But as we kind of look back at this, it was just one guy going, "Hey, I just applied how God made me to this thing, and I took him up at what he was offering." And what did he find as he walked with Jesus for 40 plus years? He's interested in your every inquiry. And I think if you're struggling with something and you just don't know which way is up and you're frustrated, that's okay. Consider it pure joy when you're struggling with that, because what he wants you to do is to come to him and understand his perspective, because he will show you a way out, show you a pathway that's straight. And that's where actually the real value is. It's in the peace that transcends all understanding, because God's economy is not gold, it's not money, it's not crypto, it's not Lambos. It's a peace that transcends all understanding. And of course, you see then yourself as a part of this overarching story, which is the strategic Jesus who's out front, who's accomplishing these things. That's why Steve said, "Matt, don't add any energy to this left-hand side of the slide, this mammon thing. Understand that all tools are neutral and that we animate them with a certain nature and character." And so I'm just really thankful, that I'm exposing this journey to you and kind of the ahas and the revelations through, this podcast and such. But um, I've always wanted to know, what are we doing here? What's the whole point of this thing? And it's really cool that God has given us a role to play. And in a way, the reason that he left and sent us the Spirit and all of these things, like, is, hey, you're being tested and approved. You're literally in this process. You're an agent of mine. And I if I didn't tell this story, I wouldn't be doing it right. The story of the prodigal son hits me so many times because he goes to his father and he says, "Dad, I want my money now." And of course, an inheritance while the dad's alive is kind of like the most offensive thing you could say. And his father agrees. He's like, "Okay, here you go." And what does the son do? He runs off and he spends and squanders the money in wild living. And he runs out of money and he gets a job feeding the pigs. And he finds himself in the field, feeding slop to the pigs. And he thinks, "Man, I'm in a tough spot. My father's servants eat better than I do." He's like, "I wonder if I went back to my dad's house." Right? And think about that. I wonder if I went back to my father's house, if he would accept me as a slave, because the servants, the slaves, they get treated better than this. And so he gets this idea. Well, maybe I could go back and ask him to be a slave, because he's probably pissed off at me for doing this. I wasted all the money. And what happens? Comes back, and his father runs out to him, which I'm sure is a surprise. And he's like excited and happy, and he's like, "Wow, I'm sure that's grace, right?" Like, what? I did not expect this. And what does he do? The son comes before him and he says, "Father, I've sinned against you and I've sinned against God." So he recognizes his condition and his position. And what does the father say? He says, "My son, he was dead and now he is alive." And what does he do? He puts a robe on him, he kisses his neck, but he gives him a ring. And in that era and in that time, the word signature, when you sign your name, comes from a signet ring. And he gives him this ring. What is that ring? It's authority to represent the family. When we come back to the Father's house, he gives us authority to represent the family. But what are you recognizing when you come back to his house? Wow, I'm understanding the Father's nature and character. I'm understanding who he is. Because before, I was like, "Old man, I got it from here." And so is the story of life. Old man, I've got it from here. I assure you, we see very dimly. But when we see it fully, you're going to see it. And I think what's so incredible about it is, what is the whole purpose of like preaching and teaching and sharing all this stuff, is just to encourage you that, hey, there's more to the story than you see. And so this has been super profound for me, just a reminder of the fact that we got to back out and see things how he sees it. And how you do that, you ask him. And I thought it was awesome. I forgotten that Gage asked me that question. Well, how do you know it's Jesus you're talking to? And I can't believe that that was the story. Hey, when you want to talk to me, do you go talk to the dog? No, you don't talk to the dog. Talk to me. Same thing. What's your intent? Is your intent to talk to Satan? No. Your intent is to approach the Father and ask him. But so often in this world of the Christian experiences, it's presented in a way, in a very, very kind of watered down way, that Jesus, this guy, was super awesome and he walked the earth and he lived for 33 years. And on Easter Sunday, he's alive, brother. But the rest of the time, you got to come under the authority of a book. No, you don't come under the authority of a book. You come under the authority of the living Jesus, period. Because that's where this whole thing pivots on, is the living, speaking Jesus. Peter, James, and John go up the Mount of Transfiguration, and they see Jesus transfigured before them. And who shows up but Moses and Elijah, the law and the prophets. And they're alive. And what is Jesus doing? He's talking to them. Folks, that should be enough evidence for you that, like, this thing continues. These guys are alive. Did he just manifest like animatronic Moses and Elijah? No, they're there. They're live. They're literally, he's talking with them. And these guys are like freaked out. They're like, whoa, this is incredible. And they're like, do we build tents for them? As if they needed coverings. But what happens is a cloud descends on their location and a voice comes from the sky and says, "This is my son. Listen to him." Folks, Jesus is alive and he speaks. Episode 74 is over. Thank you so much for joining the Pulse today. I'm so looking forward to this next bull run, this era that's coming up. And I'm going to tell you, this election is extremely pivotal. But I would encourage you in all of these things. Hey, Jesus, how do you see this thing? How do you see this election? How do you see my role in all of this stuff? How do you see crypto? How do you see all this stuff? Are you interested in knowing? That's what's incredible. And that's why I think that what is so amazing of what happened yesterday at the courthouse, and there's a whole new system, a kingdom system. There is a whole new thing that's happening, and we have a role to play in it. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. What's your role? Have a great weekend, and don't mess with Texas. Take care, everybody.